Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is my friend Nadia Harris, who is better known as the remote work advocate, a true globetrotter who is always traveling in style, and also one of the leading voices in the future work movement. She helps companies around the world set up remote operating systems and cross-cultural barriers, and a lot of things that we like talking about, both travel-related, global mobility, and building awesome remote teams. So we cover a good bit of that here. We also get into Nadia's personal story, growing up as a third culture kid in multiple countries, speaking multiple languages, and how that has impacted her life and work today. Had a lot of fun with this. It was really good to get to know Nadia better and share her story. I hope you all enjoy. Please help me in welcoming Nadia to About Abroad. I can't believe that it's already been a year since we met in Berlin, which, if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time that we ever actually met in person. But are you sure it's already been a year since then?
Yeah, it was October last year because I flew in like crazy last minute from Naples to Berlin, and I almost missed the intro dinner. So I came in last minute.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. Well, you know better than me, I guess. Yeah. It's right around your birthday. So the birthday's coming up, correct?
Yeah, I will be 1 year older in 3 weeks. So that's how I see it.
Perfect. Well, yeah, you have the right benchmark to know for sure. Then that blew my mind. Yeah. Well, I imagine, I don't know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you might be somewhere cool and exotic for your birthday. So wishing you a happy future birthday in a very cool location. That's just based on me following all your journeys around the world, which seem like perpetual. Like, I'm always like, does Nadia ever stop? I mean, you know how to get around the world.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you guessed it right. Of course, I planned something. It wouldn't be me if it wasn't the case. So this time I'll be in France, in the south of France, for a couple of days, and I'm super excited because I haven't been there for quite a while. And in terms of being on the go, definitely yes. I can't stop. I think it's a positive addiction. If any addiction can be positive, then that's definitely the case. I mean, I call it this way, that it feeds my soul with experiences that I need to survive, literally. That's why I can't stop. Let me put it that way.
I can totally relate to you. There is something very addicting about it, and once it gets into you, it's kind of hard to shed that, because otherwise, I feel like sometimes when you come back home, I wonder if this resonates with you, but like when you come back home, you maybe it's nice to be back for a little bit, but even if you're exhausted from travel, even if you're kind of like over it in that moment, it doesn't take very long before you like get that itch and you feel like you got to scratch it again in some way or another.
Yeah, whenever I come back home from somewhere, so maybe this way. Years ago, when I wasn't traveling that extensively, whenever I came back home from a trip or a longer journey, whatever, I felt like, no, I'm home again. When will I do this? When will I have this fun again? And because of that, I thought, well, it has to change. So now I do it this way, that whenever I come back home, I'm so happy to be here, to actually enjoy all these things, to calm down, because I know that my next getaway is already planned. Always. I never come back home without knowing that there's something else on the horizon, Never. Literally. It's been like this for years.
That's a really good trick. Like you have to have the light at the end of the tunnel already lit, right?
Always, each and every single time. I mean, there is no situation when it doesn't happen, because it's like, it's mentally like, okay, so what next? Nothing? There is nothing. So just this routine. So I always avoid such situations.
Oh, that's amazing. Is that people? A lot of people that are listening to this who already follow your work and know you, either like in real life or through your virtual profile, like they know you as the remote work advocate. They see you going around speaking at conferences and advising companies, and like you're doing a lot in the remote work space in terms of work. Um, and I think you're one of the few people that meshes that really nicely with the like nomadic kind of like traveling lifestyle. Also, there's a lot of people that live in the like digital nomad world, and they're like perpetual travelers. There's a lot of people that are those remote work advocates that are teaching people how to, teaching people in companies how to obtain remote work or to optimize their remote work. And you kind of do both actually, and do them both really well. Is there one side of that equation that's like, that was the original part of this story for you? Like the one thing that kind of like pulled you into the other? Was it the travel, or was it the remote work, or was it actually like the pure fusion of the two that really called to you?
Yeah, I think it's the pure fusion of the two, I would say. I don't even think that I would intentionally, like from the beginning, all the things that I did, I wasn't intentionally thinking like about becoming a remote work advocate to begin with, and not really. It was just something that just happened, because it was something that I believed in. And the same thing about being a digital nomad. I call myself a part-time digital nomad because I do have a home and I have getaways all the time, right? That's how I organize myself. But then in the beginning, I thought, well, I'm not really like 100% digital nomad. But then in the end of the day, I really do this extensively, and I'm like all in wherever I am and whatever I do. And for me, it's all about this experience. That I mean, the reasons for me working remotely, it's there are tons of reasons, but one of them is to be able to have the lifestyle that I want, and I know what lifestyle I want precisely, exactly. So I'm like, it's just something that I just won't give away, So it's both things together that happen all the time. I don't have work-life balance for sure. I have work-life integration or work-life fit. That's the way I would call it. But I mean, it's both a compromise, but both, like I would say, a romance of work and life and lifestyle and fun and experiences and everything that just happens over and over again.
Yeah, I kind of like to think about it like remote work fuels or facilitates the lifestyle that I want to live. So therefore, like that's where my original interest in remote work came from. Like, oh, if I really want to live that lifestyle, I need a way to support that lifestyle. This is the best way I can see to do it. But over time, that's transitioned, I think, because that was like purely focused on me originally. Like, this is what I want, and this is how I can get it, and that's cool. And I think like as the years have passed, I've become more interested in sharing how this can be done at scale, and sharing how it doesn't have to just fit the backpacking nomads lifestyle. Like I love seeing these stories of like, families who are taking 3-month workations now, or 1-month workation or whatever, and going and spending time abroad because the parents at one point really cared about, that was a core part of their identity, was traveling and exploring and all the things that you and I love about it. But they felt like they had to like sacrifice that for their children's future or whatever. And now they're getting to do it because they have remote work and they don't have to give up a career. And so that end of the spectrum to the nomad who just wants to like perpetually be on the road, and backpack and do hostels and everything in between. I just think like there's something really cool about seeing these things come together, and how it can allow people to live the lifestyle they want. Like you said, you're able to, precisely what you want, and you're able to have that because of this style of work, which for me is like that's the whole why behind this whole thing.
100%. But you're actually a slow mad, aren't you? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that the
I don't
case,
even know
right?
if the slow mads would have me. Like I'm like, I don't know what tribe I belong in. But like, I don't really like moving around very much. I really like my routine. I like I like having like the sense of community. I like the home base. I'm kind of tired of like logistics and packing and unpacking and figuring out like I'm a little bit, I mean, I work at a productivity company, so I'm a little bit of like a productivity nerd. And every time I have to like recalibrate my routine and my processes and everything, I'm like, like I don't really want to do that stuff. But every few months is perfectly fine. I'm pretty cool with that. So it's a good balance for me. Right now it's like 3 months, 4 months in a place. And then the goal is really in the next year or less to actually be like settled down again in a place and just do like workations from there. I think a lot like you. I don't know. What is your cadence like?
Oh, well, I would say once a month. So that's quite intense. Sometimes even twice a month. That does happen, depending on, well, my ideas that I just have.
Depending on the ad that hits you on Instagram, you're like, oh, well, I have to be there.
That happens that I do see people and I'm like, oh, that is cool. Like, I really want to do that now. So it does happen. Or it's like, I have a hobby, which is a late night hobby, like 1 a.m. hobby, where I sit on all the, flights, different airlines, and I check what do they offer this time. And I'm like, oh, I haven't been there for a while. There's this cool restaurant I really want to go to again. Why not? So
So
that's
guilty. I
yeah.
am so guilty of this. Like, I drive myself crazy sometimes because I'll have like all these tabs of flights and cool locations and hotels and like basically planning vacations that I'm not going to go on. Like mapping them out and looking at the price differences and be like, oh yeah, that could work. And I'm like, looking at like a year out or something. I'm like, I'm not actually planning this right now. What am I doing? But it's a sick little hobby.
Yeah, I have the same thing with Saudi Arabia now. So I'm like, oh, 100%. Next year, I hope next year. But I have everything picked. Trust me. It's like when I go there, I feel like I live there. No kidding. No, I mean just, of course I'm kidding. Yeah, no, but I mean it's something I've been planning for quite a while, and it has to be the experience, like really to go to the desert and what I'm going to eat, where I'm going to sleep, where I will swim, literally, like all the locations, all the hotels, like everything is really picked already, So I do the same thing, so don't feel guilty about it because there's more of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, these are my confessions. But what is it about Saudi Arabia that calls to you, just out of curiosity?
So, well, it's definitely the fact that it's been a closed country for years and it just opened up quite recently, I would say. They have this project that they're going to really target tourists from all around the world. There are tons of investments made in that country now to really become the number one within that area in terms of tourism, which is very fascinating. I also see a lot of capital being invested there from the Western world as well. But that's not really the point. The point for me is also the culture that has been, so distant for such a long time and now kind of is ready to open up a bit. And in addition to that, there's actually a great location, which is which is in the middle of the country. It's on the desert. It's called Alula, and it's a natural habitat. And I don't want to compare it to Petra, but in a way, it's kind of bigger in terms of everything that was built there thousands of years ago. And you basically go there, you sleep there. It's a lifetime experience, like among the rocks and everything, and all these tents. You get this amazing experience, and you go to do the sightseeing. And there's also a lot of tech as well, in terms of all the innovation, the buildings, everything, the architecture, the way it's being built. And it's just fascinating to see. And I mean, I've watched tons of videos about it, what people do, where they go. There was also a time in my life years ago when I was really fascinated in terms of everything that is about the Middle East, like literally each and every single country. And I read tons of books about Saudi Arabia as well, and interviews with people who moved there. And then interviewed locals, women especially, how they live, how they function, how it differs from our Western culture. And it's just been something that was always fascinating, and now when I have the opportunity, I just really want to do it.
That is easy to understand when you start laying out all the details. I mean, yeah, I'm actually there's so many parallels I can relate to you on there. Like I also had a chapter in my life where like I was just reading tons of books. Like every book I would finish, I would like the next one I would pick up would be in a similar vein about the Middle East, and some fiction, some nonfiction. Like I was just like really interested in what was happening in that part of the world. And I couldn't even say why. Like it wasn't like a strong, like a burning desire to go travel there or something. I was just really fascinated. And through that, I've, it's grown to be like one of these, like Saudi Arabia also for me is like one of those countries where I'm like, I really do just have to go there. And one of my first episodes here on About Abroad, we talked a lot about Saudi. I had a friend, like it was one of the ones I was really looking forward to when I started planning this show out. I was like, I can't wait for that conversation because she's a girl from Australia that lived there for like 5 or 6 years. And so she just had like so many insights to share about the pros, cons, the challenges, but and just the beauty and the history. And I think like for a lot of us coming from like the Western world, we, you know, if you're from the US like I am, like you grow up being really excited about going to maybe to Latin America, just to your south, or over to Europe because you studied a lot of like European history. And there's all these other regions around the world that sort of fly under the radar in that regard, which is so weird to say, but I feel like there's some reality to that. And then when you start learning about them later in life, you're like, oh my God, I have to go. Like I've seen, you think you've seen a lot, but you realize the more you see, the more you realize you haven't seen. And that's like a perpetual thing also.
Yeah, it's totally the case. I fully agree, and I think you also reach a point. I mean, I've reached this point that in most European countries, I've been several times, more than several times actually, more than several times. Sorry, and then now I think, well, I also tend to look at all these things and travel and cultures and being in a place. Obviously, I have a very certain travel lifestyle and travel attitude, which is something that I've been building up for years to really be able to have the experience wherever I go. It's always planned, like every single detail. But then it's also about the bias that you have. So, I mean, it's not so whenever, let's say, I go to another country, I'm trying not to stay in a chain, like in a hotel that belongs to a chain. It doesn't give you this unique experience because it's the same all around the world. Or just go to places where you only have tourists and you don't have any locals, or you just kind of miss the whole point, right? So I really love this authenticity, and it's really interesting that whenever you go and you actually experience different places, you kind of, it's a process. It happens, I don't know, within weeks or months or years, that you kind of start seeing that you were narrow-minded before, and whenever you go and experience more and more, you see, like, how your horizons broaden and how you learn to understand people as well, and how you're not supposed to be biased and how you are biased in actually everything that you do on a daily basis, right? With having your judgments about something which either someone told you or you heard it somewhere, until you experience on your own that, oh, why is it really that way? Well, maybe it was actually a different way from a different perspective. And I think that's fascinating.
Do you have like, when you say that, as you're saying it, I have like a little story that pops into my mind, like an experience that is exactly what you're describing. Do you have one in your mind that you're thinking of when you say that?
Um, I think many. Well, I have my story as well. Yeah, when I moved, I'm partially American as well, but I lived in Europe most of my life. But there was a time when I moved to the States, and then when I stayed for a couple of months, I started seeing a massive cultural clash that I had, although saying, it's what? Like me? No, never the case. And it's actually interesting how you, from a scientific perspective as well, because there's tons of research about it, the phases you go through when you adapt to a new place and a new surrounding. And it was the time before I read about it, and I read these books and actually all the research about it. And it was funny because, long story short, a few years ago, I've decided to study intercultural communication. And then that was the time when we had a class about all these steps of actually growing into a new environment. And then I took this book, I started reading, and I'm like, wow, I know this from my experience. That is so crazy. You don't even have to learn anything by heart.
Yeah, I could imagine. You're like, I could teach this class. I've been there, done that. So that's really fascinating though, because I think that's part, we started off talking about like sort of the addiction of travel. And for me, that is part of the addiction, I would say. Like part of the reason why I really love immersing myself in other cultures is because it pushes your limits. It forces you to rethink some things. And I think, I didn't leave the US until I was 18 years old, though I had like a really strong desire to for a few years leading up to that. It wasn't on my radar as like a need or an interest or something. So I grew up where I grew up and with the beliefs and thoughts that I had there. And it was immediately upon leaving my little comfort zone of home that I was like confronted with things that were mostly fun at the time. Like it was like just fascinating and interesting and stimulating to like be challenged by certain things that were very easy to do at home. But also like some core beliefs and thoughts and stuff that I was just like, wow, I'm actually rethinking this. And over time you get to kind of pick and choose the pieces that you like and continuously build the lifestyle that you want to have or the thoughts that you want to have. But it's stepping outside that comfort zone where a lot of that growth starts. And so I think there's something like really fun and interesting about that. And it's part of the addiction, because once you've started doing that continuously, it's like reading or something, right? It's like, well, once you've learned how interesting or how fun that can be to grow in that way through that book, you're like, well, I got to pick up another one. I got to try this again. Like I can't just stop with one. And that's part of it for me.
Yeah, but I think you also have to have a lot of courage. I mean, because, now I think about all the people who would say, well, I'm scared to think about the fact that there may be such opportunities in life, actually, because, and that's true, because I think that for the most part, obviously, if people who listen to us either do workations or are digital nomads or work remotely or whatever, okay, for them, it's kind of easier to understand. But I mean, still, I do have, I don't want to say friends, but people who I know because I went to school with them or whatever. And then it happens to me that, I don't know, I post a picture still on Facebook. Yes, I'm old on Facebook. I know that the younger generation doesn't know what Facebook is, but yeah, I'm the older one. So I still tend to
God,
post.
we are old. We've seen Facebook. We grew up without it. We've seen it come and now seen it go. Like, am I 80 or 40? Like, I don't know.
Exactly. It is what it is. But I still post sometimes, right? Because my target group, I mean, not target group, the people that used to grow up with me or whatever, they're still there. So I posted, and I mean, as much as in our community, it's relatively clear what I do, what you do in general. Then there are people who reach out to me, I don't know, with birthday wishes, right? Because that's the time of the year when they get reminded, like, well, hi, where are you this time? Like, what is it that you do? Like, how do you support yourself? And I'm like, I'm trying to be so explicit about every single thing that I do. And then I see like, oh, yeah, no, but I wouldn't be able to, but I can't, but I this, but I that. I mean, and I do understand that there are tons of different circumstances. But then in the end of the day, I also think that you kind of have to have the audacity and the imagination to be able to even start dreaming about something like this when you're not even there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it starts with a bit of audacity. That's like the best possible word I could think of, because in some ways it sounds ridiculous and almost like I've even had, I wouldn't say I've like lost friendships or burned any bridges, but there have definitely been some people in my life that were perturbed for some reason or another because I chose to kind of buck the traditional mentality about what like work, career, life, family, all those things mean, and trade those for this lifestyle, which admittedly does come with some sacrifices. Like, for example, like, I mean, I'm gonna miss this year. I'm gonna miss a wedding that I really want to go to, and it's partly a work conflict, partly a travel conflict. Like, but if I wasn't over here, I could probably make it work, and that's a sacrifice, and that could rub some people the wrong way. There's other instances where like, you've got somebody that you live close to and they're like, okay, you're basically choosing this lifestyle instead of being near me. Like you're choosing that over this, or former employers who are like, you're trading this for that lifestyle. Like there are people along the way that feel like they're getting the short end of your stick. And it's maybe not fair. I don't know, but it is just reality.
I like to look at it this way that whether I like to look at it this way, like whether it's my preference to look at it this way or not is a different thing. But it's really this way that there's a price for everything in life. You You just have to know whether you agree to pay the price. And it's exactly the way you're saying, because now when it's this way that you're saying you would miss a wedding, well, this is the price you're paying. But then in the end of the day, if you imagine yourself being where you were before, maybe you would have a much bigger price to pay, which is you wouldn't be yourself. It wouldn't be who you are today, right? But all these experiences and all the great things that happen. So obviously, I think it's always this awareness, because many people, they get very surprised. And I think that you either have to be open and understand that, well, it's just not going to be sugar coated 24/7, because of course it's not. And, although I like to publish all the fun stuff, there are days when I feel like, no way, I can't take it anymore. As a matter of fact, no, seriously, there were several trips and even conferences this year that I had to call off last minute, because I was so mentally and physically exhausted. And in altogether three within a year, which is a lot, three different events, trips that I've been so excited about. But it's just that it's also priorities. It's also things that happen. So in the end of the day, it's not this way that someone will look at you and say, oh, like, he's having this great, amazing lifestyle, living wherever, posting these pictures, But in the background, you and I know that it's tons of discipline and hard work, and really being on top of things to be able to know that you can actually live up to this lifestyle in the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You nailed it. I love that framework of thinking through it. Like there's a cost for everything. And I mean, I tell people all the time, like, if you feel you have this need inside you to go live a slightly alternative lifestyle, or whether that's for like a month or a year or a whole lifestyle change completely, like you owe it to yourself to at least try and see if it actually works. Because worst case scenario, you probably just like return to where you were before, and life will continue. But you'll always wonder, like, should I have done that? Like, should I have made that? Should I have pivoted to the left a little bit and perhaps gone down a slightly different path to ultimately arrive to where I really wanted to? Or like, should I have just played it safe and stayed in the nest? And most people, they pivot left, they go try, and it all works out in the end anyway. So if you feel that, you owe it to yourself. If you don't, you don't have to force it to live up to somebody else's, Instagram feed and expectations for what life are. Like, keep doing you and enjoying what it is that you do, what brings you joy. Like that's the whole point. It's just about having the more of the options to do so is what I think you and I care about most.
Yeah, 100%. And I once heard, it's not like I fully agree with what I'm going to say now, but I once heard it and I read it at the right moment, which was like, oh, if you're scared about it, if it makes you feel scared, it's probably the right thing to do. And I saw that exactly in a moment when I didn't know what to do. And then now I know. Okay. And I did that definitely. And again, going towards this direction. And it's like you're saying, well, if you don't try, you may regret it forever. Okay. Because we only live once. That's what I believe in, at least. So, never know. But it's this way that for me, it's better to look at everything as an experience that kind of feeds us from the inside. Right. And then rather than knowing, oh, what would have been, what would have happened. Obviously, again, it's not like being completely not thinking about the consequences, because I'm not saying burn all bridges now, quit your job tomorrow and say like, I hate you, I'm going to travel the world now. Don't do that. I had a conversation once, I think it was years ago, it was 2019. I was in London at a digital nomad conference. And there was, I don't remember his name, by the way, anymore, but it was one of the founders of co-living spaces in Bali back then. And he was talking about the people who arrive at his co-living space, exactly the type that I'm talking about. They were fed up with everything, so they just bought a one-way ticket. And then for the first 2-3 months, they still had enough money to live on. They had no idea what they were going to do. They were just so frustrated. I'm like, well, maybe that's not the right trigger to pull, but give it a thought. If it's deep inside what you want, or if it's just the frustration.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexity. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexity. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexity's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help of the team at Lexity. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexity is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad2023 and learn more over at Lexity.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Actually, that brings me to a question I want to ask you. I saw you posted something not too long ago that sort of shared like, if I was going to summarize it very quickly, it would just be like, at one point, this was my life. I decided to make a change. Now this is my life. And you were like proud of that, of the transition you were able to make. Can you take us back to that? Like what was that transition like? What were you doing before? And then you said earlier, like, I try to be very explicit about saying what it is that I do. Like, let's let people know that, like, what is it that you're doing that you've arrived to today?
Okay. So when I'm saying that today I know what lifestyle I want, that is today, but it wasn't necessarily something I knew years ago. Okay. But years ago I knew what I didn't want. Okay. And that was already a big step, which was obviously being a nonconformist all my life without understanding the meaning of this. When I was a teenager, I would say. Yeah. So how I started, maybe what was my career supposed to be? Maybe this way. I went to law school and I don't regret it. I actually came back to the profession of being a lawyer today, which is kind of really funny and interesting after I quit it, but that story comes in the meantime. So if we go back in time and we go back to the days when I graduated, when I decided to go to law school, it was because, well, I wanted to be someone who has a solid job, something that is socially wow, right? It's just something solid. It's just something that people look up to, like you're important, you're smart and everything. And at the same time, I always knew several languages because I'm also a third culture child and third culture kid. I grew up in different countries, and everyone told me, oh, do something with languages. I'm like, no, that's so silly because I speak them anyway. I took that for granted. And it was almost insulting when someone told me do something with languages. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is the easiest thing in the world I'm going to do. Like, do you really think that I'm not capable of doing anything else? And so that's
you should do something with walking. You walk really well and you breathe and you're like, yeah, I do those things and I learn languages. It's what I do.
Exactly. And that's how I felt, it took me years to start really, making this my advantage in later, many years later. And so I've graduated from law school and then here we go. So the traditional career path is you have this training, then you work for a law firm, maybe a corporation, you get your license, or you work in a private law firm somewhere, and then you just go to work. And then again, it's a cliche what I will say now, but you kind of dress a very specific way, you kind of speak a very specific way. And I don't mean to insult any lawyer here, by all means. And I'm today, again, one. My husband is one too. So that's not the case completely. But don't be so stiff, for heaven's sake. I can't take it anymore. And I was looking at all, it's like, hello, like, what are we going to talk about today? What's on our agenda? I'm like, why are you so boring? Everyone wearing gray and so sad. And I'm like, this is going to be my life with this pile of paperwork in front of me. Like, I feel like I can't breathe anymore because my mouth is dry. I need to do something, And then I thought, no, I can't live this way. And so 1 year before getting my license, because I was already doing legal practice, I dropped everything and I bought a one-way ticket to New York. So, yes,
logical,
exactly.
very, very logical legal decision. Obviously, I'm sure everyone at the firm approved of this.
Everyone thought that I was absolutely insane. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you going to do now? A one-way ticket. It was an Emirates flight through Milan. Well, Emirates flight, like, let's make it posh, right? I'm not flying whatever on a one-way
If
ticket.
you're going to do it, go all out. Like, do throw those papers up in the air and get on the Emirates flight.
Exactly. And so I probably had money to survive about 4 or 5 weeks. My family is American, but the fun part is I didn't tell them I was going because I wanted to do it by myself. And they don't even live, it's not even the Eastern Coast where they live. They just live more in the South. Anyway. And so that's what happened. I was very lucky. I found a job very quickly and everything. It was a completely different industry. It was with languages, but it was working in the aerospace industry, in sales. But then at the same time, I got my first remote job, which was, and here we go, languages, legal translations as well, and medical translations for a company in California. They told me it was remote. And I was like, well, what's remote? Like, what's work from home? That's not even serious. Like, how can you do that? But then when I saw with time, I started making some money on it. I thought, like, well, that's really cool. And then when I remember the first thing was that I wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to travel. And then I got this this check, this paper check. The first one was $4, by the way, because I just worked like three minutes or four because it was paid by the minute. It was a voiceover gig I had with them, which was the first thing. But then when I got my paper check and I saw that, well, I can actually buy airline tickets, to go to a fun place. Here, it clicked something in my head, and I thought, well, that is fun, So it's not the regular money that I make, but it's something in addition, which I never thought would happen. So here, let's do it. And then after some time, I moved back to Europe. And then I started working in HR, and long story, working with different companies. It happened once. So I kind of saw, well, it happened once. It will happen again and again and again and again. No one knew what remote was. I wasn't even looking for I didn't even give much thought to a methodology of what remote means. But then what I want to say about my personal transition is that for a very long time, I was very scared. Like, I was really scared. I was scared of people. I was scared of being judged. I was always a person who, again, really liked traveling, and I do publish that. I was so afraid what people will say about me and how they will judge me, especially in companies that I, for example, work part-time, or they said, oh, okay, we know you do a great job. We are an in-office company, but you will just kind of have to come once a week or whatever, and the rest you just get things done. And then I knew that they were following me somewhere in social media, and I felt so embarrassed. And then obviously I've always been a person who really liked fashion as well. And then I was scared to go and buy something. What will people say? What will people think? And I started being a person who was more ashamed of everything that I do, rather than saying, well, hey, I've built it myself with tons of hard work, with tons of gigs, going the extra mile, being open-minded. I never stole anything from anyone. It's the money that I make. But then I faced situations, when people would tell me, and that really happened in real life, oh, well, we won't give you a pay increase because you still have more money because you work elsewhere. And I think that was terrible because I was working until midnight, because I had these dreams to be able to go here and there, but I really did it. Does it mean that you give everyone pay increases but me because, oh, I'm just, because I've just been somewhere? Like, for heaven's sake, because people travel once a year. And that led me to the situation, that I was kind of like, oh, don't show, don't speak up, don't say anything, don't undermine anyone, like don't. And that was finally, I think, 2019. And then I was at the point of no return when I said, That's it. I quit everything that I was doing, like literally, which I'm saying this is definitely not something for everyone to do. Okay, like don't do it. It was, I think, 2 weeks before the pandemic started officially. I was like, well, let's see what I'm going to do now. And and again, those were, I was working for companies that were hybrid and remote, all over the world already, but without the brand and anything. And then I thought, well, I'm now going to start focusing on the things that I really want to do. Of course, the beginnings were bad. When I look at all the things that I tried to build, the content that I was publishing, everything, it was just, and I also wanted to be someone who fits in. I felt like, oh, how am I going to speak to someone who's from the corporate world, and to be like, oh, she's one of us, so we will accept her services. But at the same time, someone who's from the startup world, like, hey, we got to be a little bit more open, agile, and whatever. And I tried to fit in, and then I know that was the worst thing to do, because in the end of the day, you have to learn to be yourself, and that's been the long transition. Until today. And that what makes me proud, because today I'm a person who's able to say, well, this is me. You either take me or you don't. I work on constant improvement, but I'm not going to pretend that I don't know something, and I'm not going to please you just because I feel small. And I think it takes a lot of time to get to that point, which hopefully is where I am now. That was a long monologue. Hopefully, it didn't bore
No,
you to death.
not at all. No, it answers so many questions and makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that authenticity thing is so important, and it's really, I think it sounds so easy to say, but it's very easy to be a people pleaser, or to morph into the group, or to adapt to the group that you're around when it's your personal life, or when the stakes are small. But when you're talking about, like, cutting ties with a profession, going, dipping your toe in the world of entrepreneurship, building a personal brand, building a company brand, like sticking yourself out there and taking a stance on something, which inherently means you're saying yes to some things, but you're saying no to a lot more things. That is scary, and it's scary for companies. Like, a lot of companies fail at this. They don't take a strong enough stance in who they are. So they don't really, if you don't stand for something, you don't stand for anything, kind of thing. And then I think it's just super hard when you're an individual, solopreneur, or managing your own small team, like making those decisions, and therefore, like, turning away opportunities by saying that you actively want other opportunities is really, really hard. So kudos to you for, like, leaning into that. Cause I do think, like, your brand, like what you do, is very clear for anybody that follows your work. And it's clear, like, you're comfortable, or it seems, at least, you're comfortable in who you are. And somewhere along the way, I think, like, the fusion of being a pro at what you do, but also having lots of experiences in lots of different countries around the world, growing up a third culture kid, like, you've been challenged in all those different ways to kind of, like, make you feel okay doing that at this stage in life, even if it didn't feel so comfortable, maybe not that long ago.
Yeah, no, that's very valid to say. And I really like to be open about it, because I know that today it's very easy to say, like, oh, well, that's amazing. Here, you do this, you do this. It's so fun. It's not always fun. And there are always days, when I also worry, and I think, like, oh, maybe not now. And maybe I don't worry that much, because I'm like, oh, worrying won't bring you anywhere, literally. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I'm like, read it every day until you actually believe it. Don't do that. Don't worry. It's nonsense. Yeah, no, but it's been difficult. It's really been difficult. I landed, I remember, in New York, and I'm like, well, super tired, 23 hours without sleep. Like, what now? Like, what now? Like, what am I going to do? Or then back, I quit, and I'm like, I remember myself walking. It was a mall, actually, in Warsaw. And it was, I remember, those are these silly moments that you remember when you do these things in life, right? Like, I was walking, it was a mall, and I saw something that I liked, and I thought, like, oh, I'd really like to buy that. It's like such a cool outfit, but I won't buy it because very soon I won't have any money. I better start saving now, and those are these thoughts that I'm like, no, don't do that, because it's just going to hurt you for a long time, And then again, that was always the fear. And it's not like I'm fearless. I'm always kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? Like when I make this decision, or there is no way back. You cut things. Now I said I went back to law. Yes, remote work law, and how to hire people all around the world, contractors, employees, everything. And this is something that I specialize in today. But I had no idea that that would ever happen, you know. And I think it's also this situation that people, and that's really important to also mention during the story, that, you know, I think in people's mindset generally, and in most societies, it's this way that you kind of have to be one thing, that you have to have one thing that you specialize in, and that this is the path, that's the career path that you're building. Because even if a recruiter sees your resume and they're like, oh, you've done tons of things, they're like, oh, you're crazy, you don't know what you want. But I'm like, who told you this nonsense? You know, it's about monetizing your skill. You can do, I don't know, you can do horse racings and be a content creator and a lawyer and have a restaurant and jump. I have no idea, whatever you want to do. Like, who imposed all these patterns? And people always told me in the past, Nadia, you have to concentrate on one thing. Only do one thing. But I don't want to do one thing because tons of stuff is so fascinating. And I think that this is one of the biggest cliches that narrows our possibilities to actually do the things that we want in life, you know?
Yeah, we could probably go on about this for a long time, but I think it's I think the cool thing is, like, for you and I, from our perspectives, it seems that there's more optionality than ever, and people are able to, you know, access to remote work, access to global mobility. You know, is just like leveling the playing field, and it's not fixing all the problems. It's presenting lots of new ones that you're that you're having to solve, I think, in your day to day. But the fact that there is more optionality is, you know, a pretty cool aspect of this whole movement. So at least we're excited for that.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And I mean, you know, that's also my mission, because I think that the more people hear about it, it's the thing that they weren't aware they wanted, like me. If someone told me, you know, oh, how many years ago? 12 years ago, roughly, that, well, you're going to be doing what you're doing now. That's why I told you I had no idea what I wanted. I just knew what I didn't want. And I assume that there are tons of people out there like this who haven't even heard about it. They can't even imagine that there is such an opportunity. And I mean, I don't blame them. They can't imagine because, you know, and I wrote an article about it recently, that it's what we are fed with since we were children, right? That you have these TV series, people wearing suits, you know, skyscrapers, driving cars, running into all this, and it's just subconsciously this is something that you just take for granted in the end of the day, right? And then suddenly they come across, like, I thought, like, who's a digital nomad? These people with a backpack, what, you know? And that's not a one size fits all definition, by the way. There is none, right? Yeah, but it's actually, in the end of the day, about the thing whether you're willing to fight for yourself. And I always say do that, because nobody else will, you know?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, the opportunity may be there, but you have to stand up and snag it yourself. I was wondering, you mentioned before you being a third culture kid. You mentioned, you know, having lived in the U.S. for a bit, and I don't even think you've mentioned yet where you permanently live, though I do know, but maybe the audience doesn't. So, like, I wonder if you could elaborate on that chapter of or that aspect of your life, because I think it connects a lot, whether like actually tangibly to your day to day, or just kind of subtly in the background. But I feel like there has to be some connection there, and I'm personally just interested.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Germany. And that is also one of my mother tongues. I say one off because literally it is one off. Yeah, and then so that is, so part of my family is German, and part of my family is American, and part of my family is also Polish. So now I live in Poland. However, I also lived in the States, and so I've been through these three locations, I would say, well, most of my life. They're completely different, all of them. So you do feel these clashes, especially for me. You know, I think there's been a time when I haven't gone to Germany for years. And I actually lived in Italy for some time, for a few months. And then, but it wasn't last year when I flew in from Italy to Berlin. It was before. I went to Germany after I think 7 or 8 years of not really being there. And I mean, I landed and I thought, what's happening? I'm having a I'm having a huge clash. Although, I myself grew up with that culture back then. Yeah, and it's fascinating. So for me, it's always been very natural. I would switch from one language to another very quickly without even thinking what I was doing. I remember a situation when I had my grandmother from Poland, for example, sitting with me in Germany. She came to visit, and then I had my grandmother from the States, also in Germany, sitting there. And I was at the playground, so with the children, I was like speaking German, playing whatever. And one grandmother, they didn't both speak the same language, so you have to understand. I was kind of in the middle a bit. Although my American grandmother, she spoke German too, because she's German by origin as well. And so I have it on video, that was recorded back then because they really wanted to have this of me, not seeing me so often. And I actually have that at home, and I sometimes watch it, being super nostalgic, like, oh, these days are gone. And I see myself, speaking with these children in German, and then saying something to my grandmother in Polish, and then to my other grandmother also in German, but also in English, and kind of like, what? Completely like without any trouble, like what is happening, And I think from a cultural perspective, it's been exciting, but I never noticed these differences until I started learning about them.
Oh yeah, I mean, for someone who grew up in the total antithesis of that, we're like, nah, you don't need to learn another language; it's fine. I've always fascinated by people that had that experience, and I think it's such a cool superpower that more and more people that I meet now come from families where their children are growing up learning multiple languages just by default. And I just think it's such a not just obviously like, okay, that's cool, you can speak multiple languages, without even having to try, like you just get given that gift as a child, but also like all the little things that teaches you, like the emotional intelligence that you learned from that experience, having to like translate for your two grandparents who are 60 years older than you. Like that's an incredible experience, like a little one, but it's like a huge impactful experience in a lot of ways. And I just think like your life was probably packed with lots of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially that, it's also being in one location where you kind of know that your parents kind of want their cultures to be preserved as well, so that you grow up with that. But then, and that was actually very exciting because when I was leaving my apartment and I went outside to play with other kids, I was becoming a completely different person. This is so interesting. It's like, there was even a time when I noticed that I have a different voice in these different languages. Maybe not today, not that much, because in the end of the day, you kind of even lose the hard accent that you have in one language. Like I had it in German. Now I still have it, but not to this hard extent that I used to. But then my tone was even different, and that's very interesting. And it really, and even now, although when I speak English, obviously you can't tell where I'm from, because again, I'm a mixture of whatever, everything. So it's completely different. But then when I speak German or when I speak Polish, then it's the tone is different. The way I speak out sentences, it's just a whole different story. And also, it's very interesting to also know how to work with people. Because, for example, today I work with a German company. Which is a German company, but it's remote first and it hires people all around the world. But then again, I also work with American companies. I sometimes have clients in Poland. I also have clients in other countries. That's not even the point. But I think it's this fact that many companies, they don't think about intercultural aspects at all, even when they plan expansion or they hire new team members. And I'm like, this is so important. I once worked with a company, and they said to me that they want to they wanted to hire people in Germany, and they're like, yeah, we will do that. We'll just take over the market because we have a great product. And I'm like, it's just not going to happen this way. Your strategy, it's like it worked out in one country, it won't here. It's a completely different mindset. These people value different things. So it's been natural for me, but it's a homework you should do, especially in the business world.
Yeah, totally. I'm a nerd for this sort of thing as well. Like one of my favorite books is The Culture Map, which I feel like you've probably read. Yeah. And that learning Like I'm just fascinated by those things and just naturally interested in them. But then like actually diving into it with people who are like professionals, and learning from their deep studies on these kinds of things. Like we, even the ones that seem like culture to culture, even the ones that seem very similar on the surface, like there's nuances within there that make us totally different. The way we approach problem solving or hierarchies at work or giving, good, like positive feedback, constructive criticism, all of these things. So like I find this stuff fascinating, and it's true that some people do, and some people could care less about that. And when some companies hire people from around the world, their CEO is going to think heavily about how the German's going to interact with the girl from Brazil, and other CEOs are not going to think about that at all. And yeah, it can make a huge difference between success and failure, I think.
Sure. And, it's also about company culture. I hear this a lot these days. And, and I've worked with such companies where I asked precisely, okay, your strategy now is to go remote. And I'm like, well, my question is, are you willing to impose your cultural habits and ways of working on all the people that you will hire? Or is your intention to create a melting pot? And I'm like, yeah, we really want to create a melting pot of all the people feeling at home, blah, blah. And then I'm like, okay. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, there is just a huge celebration about St. Patrick's Day, which, okay, great, that comes from this country, amazing, but absolutely zero mention about Independence Day. And the people from that country are like super surprised that no one's working. Why is no one available on Slack? And I'm like, really? You have 70 people from that country. Your company has 400 in total. You kind of should have known these things. Yeah, but well, we weren't prepared, whatever. I'm like, well, but you said a melting pot, right? Or sometimes even it comes to this extent, it reaches this extent that sometimes there are even competitions or quizzes organized. And the questions there, they are by default designed this way, where someone hasn't given it a deeper thought, that people who are not from your cultural surrounding, they are not able to even compete with anyone else because they will simply not know the context. It may sound like a no-brainer for you, but for others, absolutely not. And I had situations when I was facilitating also in remote companies that have people from different locations, right? I was facilitating real life conferences, and then these people, they were like, well, Nadia, we haven't understood the question. Why is everyone laughing? And here you go. And then you're telling me you have a great company culture, right? Well, no, you don't, because you haven't done your homework. These people have no idea what they're doing, and there are these clashes that you either take seriously if you want to build something great, or you're creating something where you feel good because you've never asked anyone else about how they feel.
Well, we're bringing it full circle here because we started off talking about how we were hanging out in Berlin together last year. But I mean, throw on top of all this the digital world that we work in, and like you gave this presentation there in Berlin, which I will admit, when I first saw the title, I wasn't like, oh, I absolutely have to see this one. I was excited to watch, but it wasn't like, this is really, really important to me. It was more so just to hear what you have to say. And I walked away from that being like, we don't give this any thought. And it was about the use of emojis. Like, and like, this is a whole nother language that we're using. And so, I mean, it's not to rehash the whole thing about emojis. It was like really fascinating, but it's just, we're working in this world where like we have cultures being mixed from across the world. You have people coming from very different perspectives, very different schooling systems, very different ways that they approach all the things that we already mentioned. And then you throw in like, we're predominantly communicating like asynchronously or through video calls where you have lower context and lower use of like facial expressions and stuff like that. And then we're using like hieroglyphics basically with emojis. And you're like, man, no wonder, like this is actually really, really challenging and worth thinking critically about.
100%. And, and also that was one of the questions that people also asked me. Someone asked me, then I got a question after the presentation, what about people who are being passive aggressive and they use emojis for that reason? And I have to say it happens. And I've seen that quite a lot. But then, oh, so maybe they're bad, let's not use them. I'm like, well, it's like you're going to a physical workspace and eliminating everyone who is passive aggressive. I mean, it's the same issue in the end of the day, that they help us with emotions, right? And then I think that especially in the digital world where we kind of as you're saying, most of the stuff is low context, and it kind of should be, because it facilitates the understanding of the messages being shared across the company, across a department, a team. Then in the end of the day, we are human beings. And then if you misinterpret a message, depending on your day, and it still happens to me, I may give 2 million presentations about emojis and how to do it and what it's supposed to be, how not to run into misinterpretation, how not to drive yourself crazy after hours. I'm an expert when it comes to talking about it. But me in the background, sometimes when I have a bad day, I will read a message 10 times and think, maybe what did they mean? Was it a good thing, a bad thing? Like, and I will drive myself crazy. But then again, if there was an emoji, if it was used properly and it had this emotional touch to give me reassurance, no, it's actually good. And then again, it comes back to the legal stuff story kind of that I shared. Don't be so stiff, for heaven's sake. Like, we are supposed to have some fun as well. You know, like, why not use a party parrot if people use Slack? Why not use a GIF? That's just funny. I mean, laughing and saying I'm having a good day doesn't mean you're not professional. Okay, people mix this up. People mix up professionalism with someone sitting, I don't know, in a great suit and saying like, oh, here's my notebook or presentation or whatever, with someone being super relaxed and saying like, hey, you know, let's talk about it. It has nothing to do with someone having good quality of work, being super professional and spreading joy. I mean, again, as I've said, from my perspective, what I believe in is that we live once, and then let's just make it a better experience for everybody.
I think that's a very nice message to wrap things up on. I could sit here and talk to you for hours and keep going, but I know I have to let you get back to real work, and this has already been a lot of fun, and time has flown by. So thank you, Nadia. I appreciate it. It's been great getting to know you a little bit better, and I love following your work. I hope that About Abroad listeners, if you're not already, will do the same. Where can they go to connect with you and learn more about you personally, professionally, traveling, remote work, all of the above?
Yeah, I also follow your work, so great job. I just wanted to say that. Yeah, so LinkedIn is my virtual home. So you can find me there, my website, remoteworkadvocate.com, and you can also find me on Instagram as well. So yeah, so welcome to Exchange Experiences.
We'll drop those links in the show notes so you can go and connect with Nadia there. Thank you again. Happy upcoming birthday and safe travels. I will continue to look forward to following along and seeing where you take us. You do some pretty amazing trips, and I'm definitely looking forward to your Saudi Arabia trip now. So keep those coming.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nadia. All right. Bye. Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.